Imagine finishing in the top 7K in the world on 5 occasions, and on one of those occasions, winning FPL. Well, Simon March won it in 2014, 2015. He's here revealing his early game week 1 team. He's gone triple Chelsea. He's a Chelsea fan. Simon, welcome back to another video. Hope you're well. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me on. It's starting to feel real now. It's been fun tinkering, but now it's starting to feel like real business.
Yeah, we're at the stage of drafting where you look at your team and you're like, okay, I might have a few missing pieces, but I'm 70, 80% locked. So yeah, I'm delighted to see your team in just a second. But to recap, you not only have won FPL, which is an amazing thing to do, but sometimes we see FPL winners that have this unbelievable season, everything falls into place, and they might have random other finishes and they've never been in the top 300K or whatever. You finished 5 times in the top 7K. Like, you really are up there in the bracket of elite, one of the world's best FPL managers. And of course, you've won it. So I'm looking forward to tapping into the secrets of your success. But you've been playing for a long time, right?
Yeah, I think this will be my 16th season now.
Wow.
So yeah, and it's changed a lot over time as well. It's even the new rules this time. There's a whole game seems to change every season, a whole new challenge every time.
Yeah. Are you a fan of those new rules?
Sort of mixed feelings. I think they've done a good job with the chips. I'm quite glad to see the back of the assistant manager chip, even though I quite enjoyed playing it last season. I think it ended up being a bit more trouble than it's worth. I think with the defensive contributions is probably the big change, but I've got mixed feelings about it, because my first thought was, I think FPL, I think they like evolution rather than revolution, and so I think they're sort of dipping their toe in this water, because the threshold is still quite high for getting the points. The amount of points you get isn't huge. I think in future seasons we might see those change and it become a bigger part of the game, but for now, I think it's always nice to have something extra to think about when you're evaluating players. But I think it's not something. It's a little bit like bonus points in that, if a player gets good BPS, it's something that factors into your decision, but it's probably not going to be the main focus of your decision. It's going to be something that you really optimize towards, and I kind of think maybe that's the way that these defensive contributions are going to pan out. I don't know. I do wonder though. Sorry, not to get into it too much, but whether the big change is going to be that if you've got a good defense, that it almost removes the idea of a bad run of fixtures, because say you're an Arsenal defender, then you'll play most of your fixtures, and then you might consider historically, if you were going up against Man City or Liverpool or something, that you might bench that player, or you might just hope for the best. Whereas now you can play pretty much Saliba in just about every fixture, because even in the tough games, he's going to, got a good chance of getting defensive contributions. So I'm wondering if there's a chance that it kind of moves us towards more of a sort of set and forget defensive style. But yeah, I guess we'll see. It does open up more strategies than I thought maybe early on.
Yeah, definitely. I'm intrigued with the defenders, especially. I'm like, is the value in the cheaper guys because they've got more chance of getting DEFCON, or is the value in the expensive guys because they can still get it on top of their extras? Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one, and we'll probably learn as we go on this. But yeah, all right, nice. We'll speak DEFCON when we see your team, because you've got some DEFCON magnets in, and at other positions you've got, no, I'm going for the traditional goals and assists. So when we see your team, we'll walk through it from back to front. But in goal, you've gone. I mean, you've covered the best, one of the best defenses in the league from last season. That is Nottingham Forest, and Sells came in at 5. He could have come in at 5.5. I think Sells and Sanchez at 5 are good value. And then obviously Dubravka has signed for Burnley. We can see his fixtures: Tottenham, Sunderland, United, Liverpool, Forest. We probably only need his fixtures if we're bench boosting. But a set and forget with a Dubravka as a backup. Fingers crossed Dubravka is first choice for Burnley game week 1. But it's a nice scenario there for only 9 million spend. And that to me is better than 2 4.5 rotators. Is that where you're at here?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, in the past, the way I've looked at goalkeepers is I've always gone for the goalkeeper that faces the most shots from distance, which last season that team was Brentford, so it'd be Kelleher this year. But I think there's too many question marks over Brentford, post Thomas Frank, and so I really regretted not getting Sells last season. I had a couple of opportunities to go for him, and I didn't. And I think it's an interesting one because I think it's more or less undeniable that goalkeeper is the least important position overall in your fantasy team. But at the same time, it feels like it's really difficult to have a good season without a high-performing goalkeeper. So I don't know, marrying those two things up, I think you can move around, you can switch around your defense quite a lot. But I think you shouldn't compromise maybe on your goalkeeper. Get the one that you want, the one that you believe in the most. And ideally, it's someone that you can stick with, at least until you wildcard, perhaps even longer.
I'm going to steal that quote. You've nailed it with goalkeepers. They're the least important position in your team, but you probably can't have a good season without a good performing goalkeeper. And you're so right. Like, it's one of those ones where you just try and get lucky because it's so hard to predict who's going to be the flavour of the month. There's always a 4.5 that comes to the fore. And obviously, it was Sells last year, and it's been Pickford in years gone by, and it's always hard to predict. Let's see your back line. When you sent me your team, it was just before we had got the Levi Colwill news. Now, Levi Colwill looks like he might be out for an extended period. Like, he's not making game week 1 from what Maresca has said. We don't know how long he'll be out for. Hopefully not too long, but it's a problem. Clearly, it's a problem. So you had originally gone with Levi Colwill. And when we see like Chelsea's attacking defensive numbers season long, like good, like they've conceded only Liverpool and Arsenal conceded fewer goals than Chelsea. They also had a really good Club World Cup, right? Even PSG couldn't score against Chelsea. Like, they ended the season really well defensively. So do you still look at Chelsea and go, even without Colwill, I want to cover them? And if so, who are you looking at? It might be too early to say because I know we're reacting to the news, but yeah, it was a bit of an annoying one that for those like you that have gone sort of big on Chelsea and want to cover that defense.
Yeah, it's really annoying because I think the obvious solution now is to go Sanchez in goal. If you want Chelsea coverage, is to go Sanchez in goal and then go for maybe a Williams or an Aina from Nottingham Forest, which a lot of people would argue is the better option anyway. It's only because I really wanted Sells as my goalkeeper that I did it the way around that I did. I think with Chelsea, it's a tough one because beyond maybe Cucurella and Colwill, there's nobody that I'm 100% certain is nailed on. And I have thought a lot about Cucurella as an option because, I mean, he scored 5 goals last season. And you never really know with Maresca which fullback is going to invert, which one's going to overlap, which one's going to play as an inside forward. You just never really know. But Cucurella definitely seemed to be the best at that last season. I think he's probably well worth the value at 6. So I think that's something that I'm going to look at. But there's a chance, we'll get into it, I guess, later on, but there's a chance that I might have to make quite big changes to the team that I've sent to you because of injuries and things. And so I might overhaul my defense altogether and possibly even go 4 at the back and look at the likes of Gvardiol or Aït-Nouri. I feel like Trent is a big absence. Do you feel this, that the game isn't quite the same without Trent Alexander-Arnold?
I'm so intrigued to see what happens with some of the fullbacks this year. Like, you're right, we don't have one of those fullbacks that justifies the 7.5 million price tag or the 8 million price tag that's getting attacking returns every other game. But I do wonder if Aït-Nouri's numbers vastly improve. Remember, this guy got more attacking returns than any other defender in the league last year, and he was playing for Wolves, who barely score goals. So what can he do in a City shirt is exciting. And then Frimpong's, no defenders had more goals in Europe's top 5 leagues over the last 2 seasons, I think, than Frimpong. So those two in particular are really interesting to me, but no one's going, the casuals have gone there, But in terms of engaged managers, we're looking at DEFCON points and centre backs, and we're preferring a Van Dijk to a Frimpong. But I just think the ceiling for a Frimpong or an Aït-Nouri could be massive this year.
Yeah. I think possibly Pedro Porro as well, especially with the news on James Maddison. Feel quite bad making this about FPL because it's a terrible thing that's happened to him. It looks like he's going to be out for most of the season. But from a FPL lens, it does mean that Porro is on more likely to be on more corners, more set pieces. Which perhaps elevates him, maybe makes him worth the extra 0.5, 1 million over the likes of Van de Ven and stuff. But yeah, I think that there was a point historically in pre-season where we used to get to a point where we'd kind of look at Trent Alexander-Arnold and almost sort of pretend that he was an extra midfielder, and four at the back became much more of an option. And so far, unless we see, I suppose, the likes of Aït-Nouri starting for City, bombing forwards, getting attacking points in the preseason matches, I'm not sure we've got that kind of player that we can be as confident in this time around. So I don't know. I've got really mixed feelings about defenders, whether to just go for your bog standard, boring, nailed on centre backs, or to chase the attacking points and the higher ceilings. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate. I've got Munoz is one that I've got locked in my team. I think he's just because of the attacking numbers. But yeah, okay. Well, let's see your defense. Before we do, guys, just a shout out to OneFootball who have sponsored today's video. Do scan the QR code on screen. We'll leave it on screen for the remainder of the video. But OneFootball is the go football resource in terms of free football app for live scores, for fixtures, for news, for press conferences, for video highlights, injury news, the lot. OneFootball is an awesome football resource away from FPL that I feel like everyone should probably have on their phone. So give it a download. It lives on my home screen. It's free. It's on screen. So let's see Simon's defenders, because you're right. Like Colwell's injury could mean Sanchez comes in. And if Sanchez comes in, you need a Forest defender. But you do have Van Dijk, Van de Ven, Konza and Esteve, which all feel like very good picks in their own right. Should we start with Van Dijk? Because I feel like he's in every content creator's team for a reason. The content creators know what they're doing and they're putting him in. I haven't gone there this season. I've not had a single 6 million defender, and I think I'm just slightly apprehensive about Liverpool's clean sheets in the first three. But I've got no doubt over time he's going to be an awesome pick. Is this because he's the only centre-back from the top clubs that actually has a good chance of DEFCON each week, and because he's got the goal threat that he has?
Yeah, that's a big factor, definitely. I think that the fact that he does get those defensive contributions is a bonus. He's quite a recent addition to my team. I did have I was switching between Vardiol and Aït-Nouri for a long time, and then eventually decided that I would go with neither and go with Van Dijk instead. So I don't know. I think looking at City, their opening fixtures, I think maybe deceptively difficult. And even though Liverpool have got some difficult fixtures within their opening six, I think there's maybe a good chance of 3 or more clean sheets in there anyway. And I think in the opening six, given the way that seasons tend to be, how difficult they are to predict early on, and if you can get 3 clean sheets out of your opening six, then that's a really good return. And like you said, he's got a lot of routes to scoring, even more this season. But obviously he's been a goal threat as well historically.
Yeah, the defensive numbers for Liverpool, they were second for goals conceded. XG conceded, they were also second. And then for clean sheets, actually, they had more clean sheets than even Arsenal last year, which is quite something because we know how good Arsenal are defensively. This is all from the Scout members area, by the way. Simon and I are both very connected to Scout, and you can check them out more if you fancy. Okay, let's move on to Van de Ven, because again, I've got Van de Ven. I wonder if he's the best 4.5 million option, but I also understand for an extra 500,000, you get Romero, who's better at DEFCON. For an extra 1 million, you could get Pedro Porro, who could be an output machine because of the Maddison injury. So how set are you on Van de Ven? And do you still think in his own right he's the best of the 4.5s? Or
I'm not sure. I've seen quite a few names come up recently that are actually quite interesting. I had initially gone with, like everyone else, with Wan-Bissaka. And I still think that he's a fairly good option, even though West Ham have got some tricky fixtures. I think that Van der Ven, I think under Thomas Frank, is maybe well priced because obviously he's been priced as a Postecoglou defender, and going forward, I think that maybe they'll become a bit more solid at the back, or you've got to believe that they'll become more solid under Thomas Frank. So I don't know if I'd say he's necessarily the best. I think Konsa is a really good 4.5 option as well, but I think those are the two that I've got the most confidence with at the moment, not least based on the fact that they've both got pretty decent fixtures.
Yeah, that's interesting about Konsa, because I've not seen him in a huge amount of teams. And when we look at Villa's defensive numbers from last year, I feel like they started really bad and they got better defensively. They rank 9th for goals conceded, 11th for XG conceded, and 10th for clean sheets. So 9th, 11th, 10th, are proper mid-table defence, but they ended the season well and they have got the fixtures. Is that it for you? Is it looking at fixture runs and going, they're right at the top of the ticker?
Yeah, I mean, there's very little certainty in the opening game weeks, and things that you can look at are that are somewhat objective is fixture difficulty. The fact that Konsa is about as nailed on a defender, at least as far as I'm aware, about as nailed on a defender as you can get. And I think early in the season, that's about as much as you can ask for. I do think that the Villa maybe underperformed as a defence last season. I think personnel wise, they're pretty strong. I think they had a very congested season last year, and maybe that affected them. Whereas hopefully going into this year, another season under the manager, I'm reasonably confident in them as a defensive output, particularly given their fixtures.
Yeah, no, I hear that. This is where it gets exciting. So structure-wise, at the back, like it's a premium, and then 4.5 and 5s, and that could change a little bit if you drop a Forest defender into the mix. But it's not the most expensive backline, which means we do have a very good-looking attack. So when we see your midfield, again, that structure is 2 big names, but then also you've got 2 mid-price players here. I guess the elephant in the room straight away for those watching might be they heard Rodgers went off injured in a pre-season friendly on Wednesday night. It does look like it was precautionary. He went straight into the tunnel, but there's still hope, according to the Athletic reporting, that it wasn't anything too serious and that he's hopeful of Newcastle. Knowing Morgan Rodgers as we do, he'll probably be fine. He seems to always just make it, and he's quite happy playing with Knox. We saw that last year. But does that still worry you slightly for Rodgers?
Yeah, it does. And it would be really annoying if he was injured. And like part of the reason, annoying for him, of course, but annoying for us as fantasy managers, that part of his appeal is the fact that he's so robust that he seems to play every single game. He gets goals, he gets assists as well, which is really what you're looking for in a midfielder. And again, he's got the fixtures. Aston Villa have got a good run of fixtures. So I think if he's out, it possibly makes quite a seismic difference to my team, because I think I would really start playing around with the funds in that case. There are a few like for like options. Like I quite like Cliver at Bournemouth, which not a lot of people have been speaking about, possibly because they've got Liverpool away in the opening fixture. But after that, the fixtures are quite good, and he was very popular towards the end of last season, and scored a fair amount of goals and assists as well. I believe he's still on penalties as well.
He should be. He's not missed one, but he hasn't played pre-season either. We don't know where he is, but
right. Yeah.
I heard the other day that Leverkusen were looking for their Florian Wirtz replacement, and Kluivert was linked with Leverkusen, like Ten Hag coming in for Kluivert. But I don't know if that's going to happen. But maybe he's just injured, and Iraola's not said. But I don't think he's had any pre-season minutes yet. But
there are so many question marks. I mean, because you can go up 0.5 and get Eze, and Eze is really my kind of midfielder because he's got so many set pieces. He scores goals, gets assists. He's got so many different routes to points. Of course, there's a fairly good chance that he's going to end up somewhere else. And that seems to have been enough to rule him out of most people's thinking so far. But I kind of wonder if it's worth the risk, because if the worst case scenario is that Eze ends up at Arsenal, well, if Eze had already gone to Arsenal, he'd be in everybody's team, surely.
Yeah.
So,
and he'd be more expensive in FPL. I know he's going to come off some of the set plays and he won't take pens, but Arsenal will score a load more goals than Crystal Palace, or should do, and he'll play in a front three off the left. So yeah, you're right. He'd be in a lot of teams.
Yeah.
What do you make? Go on.
No, I was just going to say that he's definitely one that I'm looking at.
Yeah, I like Eze very much too, because you're right. He's the routes to points with him. He's just, yeah. What do you make of Kudus then? Because at 6.5 million, I feel like when a lot of people first drafted, they saw this as one of the criminally undervalued players. Like, where have FPL made mistakes with pricing to the masses? Loads would say they priced Florian Wirtz a bit too low, and loads would say they priced Kudus too low, and there's maybe one or two others. Like, I think Kudus should have been 7 or 7.5, but he's 6.5, and because of that, people see value. Saying that, I do think he's been underpriced. He's still not in my team. It doesn't mean you have to pick him, but if Thomas Frank can turn him into someone that's a goals and assist man, and Thomas Frank is very good at creating big chances for his teams, and Kudus could be a beneficiary of that. Do you like him? Is it because he covers you Spurs attack, or is it because you like the individual?
It's a bit of a fixture play again, and the fact that I think that Spurs will probably do quite well in the opening game weeks. I think his nailed onness has probably increased now as well, which is obviously a good thing. I don't know. I'll be totally honest with Kudus. Even though I agree that he's probably been underpriced a bit, he's got this sort of vibe of maybe a game week 3 transfer about him. You know how there's always somebody, one or two players. For a lot of us last season, it was Nkunku, that you get to game week 3 and you just have to get rid of them. And I don't know, Kudus is going to go one of two ways. Either he's going to really hit the ground running and grow in popularity, or I'm going to be looking for an alternative, 2 or 3 game weeks down the line. It's really hard to tell with him. I think the fact that he doesn't really have, at the moment, as many routes to points as maybe some of the other midfielders, makes me wonder about him a little bit. The fact that he's reliant on open play goals, that always makes me a little bit nervous when it comes to attacking players. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. At 6.5, he's got to be worth the risk. And at the moment, I like him better than other players in that price point. So yeah, I'm backing him for the time being. And I think Spurs playing a friendly today or tomorrow.
Yeah, they've definitely got one. And then they play Wednesday. They've got the Super Cup. So we get a couple of opportunities to scout Spurs. It's slightly concerning that it's Wednesday Super Cup, and then I think it's a Saturday game against Burnley. You're like, you don't want Van der Ven playing 90. But yeah, let's see where we go with Spurs. We'll get a good look at them. We'll also learn more about Dom Solanke, who isn't in this team. And again, by having Kudus, you don't have Solanke. Maybe that covers you for those that do. Mate, you're a Chelsea fan. Well, I can't believe I've not actually mentioned that. Many will know you as a Chelsea fan, but Cole Palmer, is he verging on must-have territory because he's got the ceiling and because he's got the fixtures, or should we be concerned by his lack of open play goals for the second half of last season?
I think he's definitely got the fixtures and he's got the pedigree. I think if we were going on, say, the last 10 or so fixtures from last season, then it would be debatable whether he'd be in anywhere near as many teams as he is. The fact that he did so well in the Club World Cup, especially the final, I think a lot of his popularity is coming from that, and the fact that he does look quite good value relative to some of the other premiums at 10.5. He looks good value. And again, a lot of routes to points. The fact that he's on penalties, I mean, I don't know if I want to say that he's a must-have early on in the season, because it's so hard to judge that at this point. But what I will say is that him and Salah, the fact that they're so highly owned,
yeah.
I know a lot of people don't like this approach, but I kind of look at that and I think, right, over the opening 6 game weeks or so, they're going to be the most popular captain in 5 of those 6 game weeks. And I feel like there's less to gain than there is to lose from betting against them in the opening stages. And so I almost have them there as just a kind of hedge, really, against the possibility that one of them explodes and, their effective ownership is 100 and something. And if you're betting against them and that happens, you've got a massive hill to climb. I think early on in the season, you don't need to make big moves. You only need to make big moves if you find yourself falling behind. So it could be that Haaland emerges as the premium that everybody wants. It could be that Saka emerges as that player. It's hard to tell at this stage, but the fact that they are so highly owned means that owning them, whether you think they are the best options or not, and I happen to think that they are, but even if I didn't, I would still consider having them in my team at this stage anyway.
Very wise words, but Ian, you're not saying go and bring in all the highest owned players, but the 2 that can hurt you most that are also above 50%, it just makes sense. So I completely hear that, and I think I sometimes need to remind myself of that because it's too easy at times just to play loose, but play loose at game week 1 can really sting. Okay, well, let's talk about your frontline. Guys, if you're enjoying the video, by the way, do hit that like button, drop a comment, but also please do consider subscribing today if you fancy. The front 3, again, we've gone... Well, let's just look at some of the numbers from some of the strikers from last season. And your 3 forwards all feature in this list. But let's talk Chris Wood, for example, 20 goals, XG of 13.35, massive overperformance. Does it concern you, because spoiler alert, Chris Wood's in your team, does it concern you that he massively overperformed and he's never really been one for huge overperformance, and that Forest perhaps struggled to create? We've seen pre-season, they've even pre-season been struggling to score goals, but again, they have got the fixtures and Chris Wood feels inevitable in this Forest setup. It's built for him. Wood's not in many teams at all, considering he had these numbers last year. What do you like about him, and how likely are you to go with Chris Wood?
He was definitely in my first draft, and again, it's partly a fixture play. It's a fact that, to my knowledge at least, he seems pretty nailed on. The fact that he also seems to be on penalties, that he can score. It might be a little bit different this season because I think that the BPS for forwards has been adjusted slightly, so maybe you can't just pop up out of nowhere, score a goal with your 1 touch of the match and score 9 points. But I think, again, at this stage, he's about as certain a bet as you can get. And yeah, I think with his XG, he definitely overperformed that. But I don't know if that necessarily means that it's unsustainable, because the way that they formulate XG is that it's based on the average player in that position. And so really, I guess you need to ask yourself, is he an average finisher or an above average finisher? And if he's an above average finisher, then perhaps he doesn't need really great chances in order to sustain that. So yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, they've had some personnel changes. I don't know how much that's going to affect them, but again, you've got to look for things that give you certainty early on in the season, and there's enough when it comes to Wood to help with that. I think we've been a bit lucky in a weird way that there's question marks over Isak, Visser, various players that we might look at as alternatives, because the question about what team they're going to end up at. To me, that's elevated Wood, because he's going to be Nottingham Forest's main striker, and and he was one of the best strikers last year. He's one of the players that I enjoyed owning the most last year, because he would just pop up so consistently with big returns, and so quite happy to back him again.
Yeah, fair. Okay, we'll see your 3 in a second, but before we do, Nicholas Jackson's on this list, and I feel like it's timely. We don't know yet where Nicholas Jackson's going to be playing next year, but it's most likely to be Eddie Howe's striker as things currently stand, although the transfer market changes very quickly. If we were to see him in a Newcastle shirt, I know he's suspended game week 1, but leading the line for Newcastle, you've watched Jackson so closely in person at Stamford Bridge. Like, what do you make of him as an FPL option? Because we can see here he's one of the few players that does underperform his XG. And when we're talking about quality of finishing, we'd probably say that's his weak point, but he does a huge amount outside of that. He also creates a lot of these chances for himself. He's not a number 9 that's reliant solely on his teammates putting it on a plate for him, like say a Solanke would be. How do you feel about Jackson at 6.5 playing for Newcastle? Would you be tempted to bring him in if that deal happened in the next couple of days? Would you be even if he misses game week 1, we know he is. Would you be tempted to go to a Jackson? Because I just think 6.5 for a Newcastle number 9, if Isak was to leave, is exceptional value.
I think so, yeah, because I think it's right. So you look at Jackson, and the big thing that you see when you watch him consistently is that he's not very clinical when it comes to putting away chances, but he does still score a lot of goals. Given enough chances, he does still score a lot of goals. And like you say, he creates a lot of chances as well. And I think a lot of the time when you're trying to assess the value of a player, it's worth looking at the team first and then the player and saying, okay, is that team set up to get the best out of this player? Is he going to get the kinds of chances that he needs? And what is he going to contribute systemically to or systematically to the rest of the team? And looking at Newcastle's attacking options, I think that not only could Jackson benefit from the fact that Newcastle have got a good array of players who can supply good chances, but also he's going to create chances for the likes of Barnes and Gordon, etc., who are capable of finishing those. So yeah, I think I wouldn't necessarily be put off by the fact that maybe he wasn't he didn't pull up any trees at Chelsea necessarily. At Newcastle, maybe he will face defenses that perhaps aren't playing as deep, and maybe that's the kind of role that he needs to be in. A team that I don't know that he can be a sort of a key part of the system rather than you are the focal point, you are the striker, you are the one that we need to rely on to score the 1 or 2 chances that we're going to get against this defense. So yeah, I mean, I would back him, and I think he's nicely priced at 6.5 as well.
Yeah, nice. Okay, let's watch this space for those on early wildcards or using early transfers. Well, let's see who you've gone for. We spoke about Chris Wood. Ollie Watkins has had an amazing pre-season. I've spoke about him quite a lot on this channel. Joao Pedro, we speak about Palmer and Salah and the high ownership and risky backing against them. Is Joao Pedro in this team for the same reason, that he can hurt you because of his ownership? Or is this just a case of going, you think he's the best of the 7.5? Because a lot in this position have got Solanke. We're waiting to hear more about his fitness, or they've gone down to a 6.5 or found money for Gyökeres. How set are you on Joao Pedro? Because I guess you as a Chelsea fan, you're fully aware that, yes, he's going to have a lot of chances created for him as Chelsea's number 9, but you also know Liam Delap's there waiting and he'll get some minutes. So Joao Pedro probably isn't going to be a 90-minute man, but maybe 90 minutes doesn't matter. Maybe 70 minutes of Joao Pedro with good fixtures is better than 90 minutes of the rest of the 7.5s. Where are you at?
Yeah, I think again, partly it comes down to fixtures play. Chelsea have got on paper such good fixtures that I kind of wonder whether it necessarily matters. I think a lot of people's objection is that he will likely come off sort of 65, 70 minutes. And perhaps that's true, but he's likely to get a lot more chances now as well. And he's shown so far that he can take those chances. He can create chances for the likes of Palmer as well. Palmer, I think, forgot to mention when we were talking about him, but he seems to be playing more on the right, or at least he was towards the end of the Club World Cup, which really benefits him. He seems to play a lot more comfortable in that position than he was playing as a 10 or on the left. him and Pedro seem to have quite a good understanding already, and I could see those two linking up quite a lot. I mean, Palmer linked up very well with Jackson, actually, and I think that Pedro is probably a big step up from Jackson. So I would like to think that dynamic can improve. I don't necessarily think that he's the best in that bracket, but given that we haven't really seen much of Solanke so far, we've got question marks over some of the other options. He's somebody that I'm willing to back at least for the opening few game weeks. But given if Rodgers is injured and I have to make big changes, I could see myself doing something a bit more drastic and perhaps downgrading him to Mark Guiu and then upgrading elsewhere. And so maybe moving towards more of a 5-man midfield or maybe even a back four.
And he's the likes of Ramsey, Esteve, if Guiu comes in, does that mean you're not looking at an early bench boost?
No, not at the moment. For me, I understand the arguments for it, but I think that there isn't enough certainty around things for game week 1 bench boost.
I'm the same. The amount of surprises in game week 1 we get with team selection. Look at last season. I'm looking at a game week 3 bench boost so it suits my team. But the more people I speak to like you, I go, actually, you're the 4th previous winner we've had on this channel in the last 10 days. Not one of you is looking at an early bench boost. And I find that really interesting because if you were to take 4 content creators, 4 YouTubers, 4 big names on Twitter, 50% would be on an early bench boost, maybe more. Yeah, I've taken 4 winners and they're the people I want advice from. And none of you are looking at that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't rule it out as an option. I think the idea of getting it out of the way and, then you do not have to build towards it going forwards is quite a compelling argument. What I think is slightly different with the bench boost is the fact that we've got it in the first half of the season, that we're not using it necessarily to build around double game weeks like we perhaps have historically. So I think you've got a bit more freedom to use it as and when. Obviously, if you compare it with a wild card, you've got the best chance of having, a full 15 players who are going to start and maybe, be optimized based on, I don't know, their performances to that point. I think that gives it a little bit more value than perhaps it has historically. I think that I've often thought you should just get it out of the way. It just creates more problems than it's worth. But now I think, well, actually, the fact that you can just use it whenever, there's always a time where you look at your team. I don't know exactly when that's going to be, but there's going to be some time in the opening 19 game weeks where I'm going to wish that I had a bench boost. And,
true.
If I've got one, then...
Yeah, so true. There's always a couple of weeks in the season you go, damn, I'm going to get loads of and you get loads of bench points out of nowhere. So yeah, that's a fair point. Okay, I'm going to ask you for one bit of advice you would give our viewers in a second. When you're thinking of that, I'm going to give you the bit of advice you gave earlier, which I think is great. So it's almost 2 bits of advice. The first bit of advice was players like Palmer and Salah, like early in the season, don't necessarily consider their ownership. I'm not saying go and Simon's not saying go and pick every highly owned player, but those that can really hurt you, those that people are captaining, like Palmer, Salah, they're the 2. It just makes sense to have them. If you were to give another piece, Simon, and whilst you're thinking, and reminder, guys, if you've enjoyed the video, hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel. What would that be, Simon? Have you got one thing?
Well, the not particularly useful, but the honest answer is to get as lucky as possible. And I don't think it's anyone's under any illusions that you don't need a lot of luck to win FPL. But I think from the inside looking out, you can see all the things that have to happen exactly the way that they happened, and you can really see how much luck was involved. But I think something that has helped me a lot is to think about. Well, I often think about FPL as a game that you play against yourself, right? Which is weird because there's maybe 11 million people playing it. But to some extent, I think like poker, there's an element of it that you play against yourself. It's about how disciplined you can be. And you can't always control the outcome of your decisions, but you can optimize your decision process. And so I think, managing the biases that affect your decision process, to help you make disciplined moves, that's a sort of key element. And one of the things that I do for that is that I use checklists, and people have made fun of me in the past about this, but I use I think it's a 10-point checklist for making transfers. And for me, it's just a kind of an objective standard that I can go through. And so instead of making impulsive moves, or moves that maybe I wouldn't make if I was in a better frame of mind, it allows me to use the knowledge that I've gained over the 15, 16 years of playing it as to what makes a good decision, and try and apply that to every transfer that I make. And that makes the process a little bit easier. I think we talk a lot about differentials and how important having a good differential is, but being disciplined can be a differential in itself. Being consistent, as I like to say, consistency is the best differential, because it's the hardest thing to do. But remaining consistent throughout a whole season, I think, is the hardest challenge of being an FPL manager, of not making knee-jerk decisions, not making rash actions that you come to regret, and really sort of taking a controlled approach to each move that you make. That can be, if you do that better than any other FPL manager, then you've got a very good chance of finishing high and perhaps even winning it. But of course,
mate, that is awesome advice, and one I'm going to certainly take. And I've read your articles before and thought similar. You're so right there, and that consistency is king. And actually being disciplined can be the hardest challenge. It's very easy to play loose and go outside the box. And if you actually staying controlled and disciplined for 38 game weeks could be the real quiz. Mate, thank you so much. I've loved that chat. And if you have too, give us your thoughts below. But yeah, mate, I've loved having you on. I can't believe your history of elite ranks. Yes, you've won it, but you've also got 5 ranks in the top 7K. That is outstanding. Like, most watching won't have 1 rank in the top 7K. It's unbelievable. Thank you so much for giving us your opinions. And yeah, we look forward to having you on the channel again. Cheers, mate.
Thanks. I really enjoyed it. Thanks again for inviting me on.
Good stuff. Guys, we will see you in 24 hours for another video. Bye-bye.